is that compared to 3 years ago, there's a lot of innovation in browser security, which means that the general recognition that their browsers bring a certain risk, to applications, web applications, and to the system, the end system itself, right? So if you look at it at a top level, it looks like there's a lot of browser security. But actually, if you dig deep, there's different vendors are trying to, very innovative vendors are trying to solve different problems that the browser presents. Some are trying to prevent the infection of a pristine, clean device through the web channel. Others are trying to secure the browser in the face of an already compromised, dirty endpoint, right? So there's different, there's different innovations that are occurring and different focuses, on solutions, all within the realm of browser security. And the great thing is that there's this innovation happening, right? In this space to try to solve these very real, customer problems, because the existing solutions don't really address it. Well, obviously, we have to stay on top of where the, kind of what the attack surfaces, are. The attack surfaces are constantly moving, right? So we have to, IE10 has a bunch of additional kind of security WebSockets, local database, large, web storage. The attack surface is going to alter, and so clearly, as a company focused on browser security, we have to kind of keep maintaining and looking at all the different ways that people can try to exploit vulnerabilities or attack a browser.
Sure. And when we talk about WebSockets, because that's of particular interest to me, I know almost nobody properly secures them today. How do you? Is it just by isolating it, or because when I think WebSockets, I know there's no encryption; it's all clear.
Yeah, actually, I think there is an option to encrypt WebSockets. I do believe
probably,
in the standard.
But I don't think anybody uses it. I've never seen it used.
The thing is that I've seen some proof of concepts. There hasn't been any attacks in the wild attacks yet that I'm aware of that leverage WebSockets, but there's certainly been proof of concepts that have turned an endpoint into like a network scanner, right, via an inbound WebSocket that basically activates the browser to do additional kind of port scanning. But we can control it because we can control all the networking that happens within a protected browser. So that's just kind of one instance of kind of the various attack surface and vulnerabilities and the controls that we need to kind of help create and allow users to apply.
So when you're talking about controlling the networking, is that inbound request routed in a different way such that it's not part of the regular stack on whatever my operating system is? So it's a separate network interface for all intents and purposes?
No, I mean it's delivered as in an HTTP payload, right? I mean we just control. We think of us as being a firewall that sits in the browser, so that the rest of the browser code logic can't, to accept an inbound socket request, WebSocket request. We verify that it's been allowed by policy. So if we can say, this browser can only interact with .quarri.com, and Schwartz.com and nowhere else. Then if a WebSocket, either attempts to go someplace or, to be originated and go someplace or come in from another place that isn't on one of those two whitelisted locations, we'll block it. So you probably know that cookies are very limited in terms of the amount of storage. I think it's it varies, but it's like 1 kilobyte, 2 kilobytes of data. With web storage, you can, store multi-megabytes.
Sure, I use it for offline Google Mail.
Exactly.
Gmail and G Drive all the time.
Exactly. So a lot of it is to support offline mode of operations. The bottom line is that means that data is now, even if it was delivered over an SSL tunnel, is now decrypted and it's sitting in the clear on the disk. Yeah. Right. So real-time malware can grab it. You don't even have to be malware. You just another application on the machine can, whether it's File Explorer or something else, can go in and look at that data. So what we do is anything that's written to disk within a protected browser is encrypted. And it's the only thing that has the symmetric key is the protected browser itself. So we use that to obviously encrypt the data as it's being written to disk and decrypt the data. So when it's read from disk, so what that means is that you get all the benefits of offline use, or caching, or disk cookies. Because there's usability around disk cookie. That you get that without the risk of exposure at the endpoint, right? Because they're not in the clear. And for any other application, they don't have the crypto, so they would need to attack and try to brute force the actual data, which is hard because it's 256-bit RC4. So.
What's your stance on whether it's the certificate authority or OCSP pinning or some other kind of protocol or authenticity check to make sure that the SSL certificate is in fact good?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's been a huge issue, right? I mean, it's DigiNotar and Komodo, and I mean, there's pretty well publicized stories about how much you can trust certificate authorities. But what we do is, because we're sold and deployed by a web application owner, right? So we're not a endpoint security product. We're sold to a high assurance web app that wants to secure the other end of their connections, right, to their web server. So one of the things we can take advantage of is the fact that the web application owner knows what SSL certificates he uses on his web servers.
Sure.
Right? So what we allow you to do is, when you get the protected browser pushed down into the end user's machine, regardless of platform, iOS, Android, or Windows, we can also deliver a whitelisted set of CNs and thumbprints of allowed certificates or CAs. So what that does is it says to the browser, the protected browser, our protected browser, basically says you can only do SSL with those certificates. And so what that does is, if the certificate store on the local machine has been poisoned, right, the end user has been socially engineered in accepting a bogus certificate authority or SSL certificate, they would be blocked. Because we only allow HTTPS connections from the protected browser to those servers presenting those CNs and thumbprints.
So it's local then, and you don't have to worry about calling out to a CA over OCSP or anything like that?
No, in fact, that's what we're doing, is we're leveraging the knowledge that the website owner has of his SSL infrastructure and his certs, push it down in an encrypted policy, right? Yeah. And so then what you're saying is ignore the certificate store that is likely poisoned.
Got it.
Yeah, and it defeats SSL man in the middle. I mean, the challenge is end user awareness. I mean, there's a lot of companies that think because they've got that padlock, and that their data is protected, right? So part of it is just an education that end users, or website owners, people aren't stealing the data over the wire. They're stealing it at the browser. It's a lot easier to steal data at the browser. So part of it is just an awareness thing, right? And that's probably our greatest challenge, is just explaining that articulately and getting into budgets, right? Because you got to get into a CISO's kind of budget cycle and those types of things. But it's a huge issue. Because people thought they were protected by the padlock, and they're not.